Have you ever been fined for something so ridiculous that it almost felt like a joke? Well, imagine getting a letter in the mail demanding hundreds of dollars just because you parked in your own driveway. That's exactly what happened to me. And let me tell you, what started as a petty HOA fine quickly turned into one of the wildest battles of my life. A battle that ended with me owning the very street my HOA thought they controlled. It all began about 3 years ago when my family and I moved into what we thought was our dream neighborhood. Beautiful homes, clean streets, and supposedly a friendly community. Of course, like most neighborhoods nowadays, it came with an HOA. At first, I didn't think much of it. I mean, how bad could it be? They're just supposed to keep the place nice, right? Wrong. The first couple of months were fine. We kept our lawn neat, paid the dues on time, and even attended a few HOA meetings just to get to know everyone. But then, one random Tuesday morning, I came home from work to find a bright orange notice taped to my door. It was from the HOA, claiming that I had violated community parking rules and owed a $250 fine. I was confused, completely baffled. Because the violation they were talking about? Parking in my own driveway overnight. Not on the street, not blocking anyone. Literally just my own car in my own driveway. At first I thought it was a mistake, so I called the HOA office. The woman who answered sounded like she had been waiting for this call all day. She smugly told me, "It's in the bylaws. Homeowners are not allowed to park in their driveways overnight." I laughed out loud, thinking she had to be joking, but she wasn't. Apparently, this HOA wanted everyone to either park in their garage or use designated guest parking spots that were scattered around the neighborhood. Driveways, according to them, were for aesthetics only. Now here's the problem. My garage was already being used for storage like most people's. And honestly, I didn't see how my car sitting in my driveway hurt anyone. So I refused to pay. That's when the harassment began. Every week, I would get another fine notice in the mail. $250 here, $300 there. By the end of 2 months, they were claiming I owed over $2,000 in unpaid violations. They even threatened to put a lien on my home if I didn't pay up. But instead of scaring me, their threats made me furious. I wasn't about to be bullied in my own neighborhood. So I started digging. I went through the HOA's bylaws, old meeting minutes, and even public property records. And what I found shocked me. You see, the street in front of our homes, the one the HOA kept insisting they controlled, wasn't technically owned by the HOA at all. It was still under the city's jurisdiction. In fact, the HOA had been trying for years to purchase the street from the city, but due to mismanagement and unpaid taxes, the deal never went through. That got me thinking. If the HOA didn't even own the street, what else didn't they own? I started talking to neighbors, and one by one, people shared their horror stories. Fines for having flower pots on porches, threats over unapproved holiday decorations. One neighbor even said they got fined for having a bird feeder in their backyard. Everyone was fed up, but nobody had ever fought back. That's when an idea hit me. An idea so crazy it might just work. If the city still technically owned the street, maybe I could buy it. And if I owned it, then the HOA would have no power to fine anyone over parking ever again. So I made some calls. I talked to a real estate attorney, met with a few city officials, and after weeks of paperwork and back-and-forth negotiations, I learned something unbelievable. The city was actually willing to sell me the street. Why? Because maintaining it had been a financial headache for them for years. The price? Let's just say it was a lot less than what my HOA had already fined me. At that moment, I knew exactly what I had to do, and that, my friends, was the beginning of the end for my HOA's petty little reign of terror. The day the city finalized the paperwork and handed me ownership of the street will forever be one of the most satisfying moments of my life. I remember holding those documents in my hands, grinning like a kid who just pulled off the ultimate prank. Except this wasn't a prank, this was real. I owned the street, the very same street the HOA used as their weapon to fine me and half my neighbors. Now here's the funny part. The HOA had no idea what had just happened. To them, I was still just another problem homeowner refusing to bend to their rules. They didn't realize their entire foundation of authority was about to collapse. But I wasn't going to reveal my hand right away. No, I wanted to wait until the timing was perfect, and as fate would have it, I didn't have to wait long. About a week later, I received another notice from the HOA. This one was for $500. The reason? My brother had come over for dinner and parked his truck in front of my house, on the street, the very street I now legally owned. That was it. That was my golden opportunity. I attended the next HOA meeting, which as usual was held in the community clubhouse. The board members sat at a long table like they were royalty, with the HOA president, a woman I'll call Linda, perched right in the middle. Linda had a reputation as the neighborhood tyrant. She lived for power trips. She was the one behind most of the ridiculous fines, and she never missed a chance to humiliate anyone who dared to question her authority. When it was my turn to speak, I calmly stood up and held the fine notice in my hand. According to this, I said, I owe $500 because my brother parked his truck on the street outside my house. Linda smirked. That's correct. The bylaws are very clear. No overnight parking on community streets. I smiled back. That's interesting, because I happen to own that street now. The room went silent. For a few seconds you could hear a pin drop. Then Linda burst out laughing like I had told the funniest joke she'd ever heard. That's impossible, she sneered. The HOA owns the streets, always has. That's when I pulled out the paperwork. Signed, stamped, and notarized. I handed copies to each board member. Their smiles faded fast. Linda's face went from smug confidence to bright red fury in a matter of seconds. You can't do this, she stammered. This is outrageous. That street belongs to the HOA. Nope, I said calmly. It belongs to me. The city sold it to me last week, which means any car parked on that street is now parked on my private property. And as the owner, I get to decide the rules, not you. Not. The neighbors sitting in the audience erupted into whispers, some of them grinning ear to ear. For once, people felt like the bully was being put in her place. Linda tried to recover. This doesn't change anything. You still have to follow HOA bylaws. Actually, I said, it changes everything. Your bylaws don't apply to property you don't own. And from this moment on, if you or the HOA try to issue me, or any of my neighbors, a fine for parking on my street, I'll consider it harassment, and I'll take legal action. Now I expected pushback, but I didn't expect what came next. Instead of backing down, Linda doubled down. She pounded her fist on the table and shouted, "We'll fight this. You won't get away with it." That's when one of the other board members, a quiet man named Richard, finally spoke up. He had been on the board for years but rarely said much. This time he leaned forward and said, "Linda, he's right. We looked into buying that street years ago, but the deal fell through. It's city property. If he bought it, then it really does belong to him now. There's nothing we can do." The look on Linda's face was priceless. It was like watching her entire empire crumble in front of her. But instead of admitting defeat, she stormed out of the meeting, slamming the door behind her. From that day on, things started to shift in the neighborhood. For the first time, people weren't afraid to speak up. Neighbors who had been fined unfairly started questioning the board. Some even asked me how they could fight back too. It was like a wave of courage swept through the community. But of course, Linda wasn't done. Oh no. She might have lost the street, but she wasn't about to lose her crown without a fight. Over the next few weeks, the HOA began targeting me in other ways. I got fines for having improper lawn edging, warnings about my trash can being visible from the street, even a letter accusing me of having the wrong shade of white paint on my mailbox. It was obvious they were trying to push me out, to break me down. But they didn't realize something. Every time they came after me, I dug deeper. And the more I dug, the more dirt I uncovered. Hidden in the financial records, I discovered something explosive. Something that would not only end Linda's reign for good, but expose the entire board for corruption. And when I say corruption, I mean the kind that could bring in lawyers, auditors, and maybe even the police. The more I dug through the HOA's records, the clearer it became that something wasn't right. For years, the board had been collecting thousands of dollars in dues, plus all the money from fines they handed out like candy. Yet when I looked at the HOA's official budget, the numbers didn't add up. On paper, they were spending outrageous amounts of money on maintenance and community improvements, but there was little to show for it. The park was falling apart. The clubhouse roof leaked every time it rained. The pool pumps barely worked. So where was all the money going? Then I noticed a line item labeled consulting fees. Tens of thousands of dollars were being funneled to some outside consultant. But when I looked up the name, guess what? The so-called consultant was none other than Linda's cousin. That was just the beginning. I found invoices for landscaping that had never been done, payments for security cameras that didn't exist, and even charges for holiday lighting in months when there weren't any holidays. It was a mess, and it reeked of corruption. I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. So I called up a few of my neighbors, the ones who had been burned by the HOA the worst, and showed them what I had found. Their jaws hit the floor. One of them, a retired attorney, immediately suggested we take this straight to the city and to a lawyer. But before going public, we decided to give the HOA one last chance to come clean. At the next board meeting, I walked in with a folder full of evidence. The room was packed. Word had spread that something big was about to go down. Even neighbors who had never attended a meeting before showed up, curious to see the fireworks. Linda sat at the head of the table, glaring at me like she was ready to explode. She thought I was going to complain about fines again. Instead, I stood up, cleared my throat, and said, "I think everyone here deserves to know where their money has really been going." Then I started laying out the evidence, the fake consulting fees, the bogus invoices, the missing funds. One by one, I held up the documents for everyone to see. Gasps rippled through the room. People were whispering, pointing, shaking their heads in disbelief. Linda tried to interrupt, yelling that I was lying, that I was making it all up. But then Richard, the quiet board member from before, stood up. He looked tired, almost defeated, but he finally spoke the truth. "I've been on this board for 10 years, he said, and I can confirm everything he's saying is true. We've been misled. We've been covering expenses that didn't exist, and Linda has been the one signing off on all of it." The room erupted. Neighbors who had been scared of Linda for years finally let loose. Some shouted at her to resign immediately. Others demanded an audit. A few even threatened legal action right then and there. Linda, realizing the walls were closing in, tried to storm out again. But this time she didn't make it far. Several neighbors blocked her path, demanding answers. She shouted something about ungrateful residents and how hard she worked, but nobody was buying it anymore. Within a week, Linda resigned from the board. Not voluntarily, she was forced out. The city launched an investigation into the HOA's finances, and from what I heard, there were serious consequences for Linda and her cousin. The rest of the board dissolved shortly after, and a new group of homeowners stepped in to rebuild the HOA from scratch. As for me, let's just say my driveway and the street outside my house are the most stress-free places in the entire neighborhood. No more fines, no more threats. And because I own the street, I even set up new rules. Rules that actually made sense. Things like, park wherever you want as long as you're not blocking anyone. Simple, fair, and exactly what everyone wanted in the first place. Neighbors started thanking me. One even baked me a pie as a thank you for standing up to the HOA. It felt good, not just because I had won, but because the whole community finally had peace again. Looking back, I realized this story isn't just about parking fines or power-hungry HOA presidents. It's about standing up when something isn't right. HOAs are supposed to protect property values and maintain the community, but too often they become little dictatorships where a few people abuse their power. And unless someone pushes back, they just keep getting worse. In my case, pushing back meant buying a street. It was extreme, sure, but sometimes you have to fight fire with fire. And honestly, I'd do it again in a heartbeat. So the next time you hear about an HOA trying to bully someone over something ridiculous, remember this. No matter how much power they think they have, they're not untouchable. Sometimes karma comes with paperwork, and sometimes it comes with a for sale sign on the street in front of your house.